"Since my imprisonment," said Faria, "I have thought over all the most celebrated cases of escape on record. They have rarely been successful. Those that have been crowned with full success have been long meditated upon and carefully arranged. Such, for instance, as the escape of the Duc de Beaufort from the Chateau de Vincennes, and that of the Abbé du Bouquois from Fort-l'Évêque, of Latude from the Bastille. Then there are those for which chance sometimes affords opportunity, and those are the best of all. Let us therefore wait patiently for some favorable moment, and when it presents itself, profit by it." "Ah," said Dante, "you might well endure the tedious delay. You were constantly employed in the task you set yourself, and when weary with toil, you had your hopes to refresh and encourage you. I assure you," said the old man, "I did not turn to that source for recreation or support." "What did you do then?" "I wrote or studied." "Were you then permitted the use of pens, ink, and paper?" "Oh, no," answered the abbé. "I had none but what I made for myself." "You made paper, pens, and ink?" "Yes." Dante gazed with admiration, but he had some difficulty in believing. Faria saw this. "When you pay me a visit in my cell, my young friend," said he, "I will show you an entire work, the fruits of thoughts and reflections of my whole life. Many of them meditated over in the shades of the Colosseum at Rome, at the foot of St. Mark's Column in Venice, and on the borders of Arno at Florence, little imagining at the time that they would be arranged in order within the walls of the Chateau d'If. The work I speak of is called A Treatise on the Possibility of a General Monarchy in Italy, and it will make one large quarto volume." "And on what have you written all this?" All right, this passage, once again, just showing the divide between Dante and Faria here, that as we've seen of Dante in prison thus far, even when time sped up over those 5 years, he spent it lamenting and stewing in his own injustice, the injustice done to him, right? Nothing more came into his mind except what he lost. And he did not employ things to keep his mental faculties sharp or occupy him, distract him, while Faria, a man that just seems to be of different disposition to Dante, spent his time writing his memoirs, creating his treatise, employing all of his mental faculties and going, okay, if I have nothing else to do but be stuck here, then I'm going to do what I can to activate my mind, get the things that I wanted to do, get out of my brain out, and these will be important works that I can take forward once I get my liberty. Okay, and I did some research here. I got to admit, I don't fully understand this in its entirety, its scope, and its potential impact. But I thought it's worth reporting on here, and maybe you all can explain it to me a little bit more. But we've been talking about Faria as a character that is presented to us. What we've been talking essentially surface level with Faria, with a little bit of indication of, what he could really be. Why is he in prison? What has he been doing on the ground with his, calculations and stuff? Why is he dangerous? Why is he here? We've also, in the text of the story, received tidbits of information from Faria himself, as well as from the jailers, that he's essentially a political revolutionary, but not in the same way that, like, Noirtier was, or is. And in this passage, he kind of explicitly lays out here that he has been working on an actual document, a work, he calls it. And when someone calls something a work, it's more than just, ramblings on paper. Maybe, at least to them. Anyway, the point is, he calls it A Treatise on the Possibility of a General Monarchy in Italy. And he's going to do it in 4 volumes, or one large volume, 4 parts to it. And he's been talking about a unified Italy. Now, I went a little deeper on this because I just wanted to make sure I was fully getting the landscape, the political and geographical landscape of what was going on when Dumas wrote this book. So here's where I'm having a hard time. I'm trying to understand, A, what this is saying about Faria, B, what this is saying about Dumas, and C, what the real-world implications of it are. here's what I've got. I'm just going to run down some facts, and we can kind of put this together ourselves. The Count of Monte Cristo, written in 1844. It is set in 1814. At least the beginning of it was. We're probably, 1820-ish now in the story. Faria was imprisoned in 1811, I think he said it was, but started writing this treatise back in like 1807, I think he said. So that's one fact. Another fact is the idea of a unified Italy. What does that mean? Apparently, Italy and the island of Sicily off its toe was not a country, so to speak, as we know it now. It was a patchwork of fiefdoms, kingdoms, and different territories ruled by different places throughout Europe. Rome and the Vatican, clearly by the Pope. Sicily was split into two different kingdoms. Like, there was just no uniformity to what was going on in Italy. Both when this story is set in the 1810s to the 1820s. Also, when this story was written and published, so 1844, that was still not a fact. This idea of a unified Italy, as we now know it today, didn't come to fruition until the 1860s. So, what does that mean? That means that Dumas is a little ahead of his time in writing about this. B, he is inserting these kind of radical ideas into a character in the past. Now, this is where I start to get a little lost in the sauce. What does that mean about Dumas? He clearly likes to write about real-world history and set his fictional characters amongst that, kind of on the fringes and in the shadows of what was really going on. But as a writer, what does that allow you to do? If I am looking at, say, the rumblings of what's happening in Italy, because that doesn't happen overnight. So if that is starting to gain steam, that idea of a unified Italy is starting to gain steam in the 1840s, while it might not have happened yet, and it's even radical in the 1840s when the story is written, how much more radical would it be if he gave the philosophy, if he gave that ideology to a character and set it in the early 1800s? Suddenly, that character almost becomes a prophet, someone who can have so much foresight in the need and necessity, or even the inevitability that these things are going to come to pass. If it was revolutionary in 1840, it would have been borderline delusional, I think, for people to hear that idea in 1807, 1810, 1811, when the Faria was imprisoned. It's radical, it's dangerous, and you can see why he's imprisoned. And I think Dumas is making a number of comments with this where he's saying it's not just, the rabble-rousers of the revolution who are being imprisoned. The most dangerous people are the ones with these huge ideas that could have geopolitical, effect on the landscape. That's huge. And I think there's some sort of commentary that Dumas is making there. He's taking a bit of a wild swing, not knowing if the unification of Italy is going to come to pass. So what would have happened in 1860? How would we view this story in 1860 if it didn't come to pass and these are held, deeply held beliefs by Faria? Faria would seem like maybe a romantic, someone that wished for a certain thing. And if he did have a kind of sense of inevitability about it, then he would seem a little delusional. But because it did come to pass, suddenly he does seem that much more intelligent, smart, forward-thinking than anyone else. At the very least, and this is, I think, playing on a term called, a literary term, called historical interpolation, where he's inserting modern ideas into the past in order to make a point. What the point he's making here is, that's where I am getting a little hazy. At the very least, it could be just showing how long it takes for ideas to take root, action to happen, things to actually take shape. That one or two radical thinkers typically aren't going to move the needle. The sands of time require many more grains of sand in order to affect that change. So maybe that's it. Just on a very basic level, he's trying to identify how long it takes for these things to happen, and maybe that you can imprison radical thinkers like this, but all you can really do is slow down the inevitable. Maybe that's also what he's saying, but he wouldn't have known that, I guess, is where I'm getting confused. Like, he doesn't know that Italy is going to become unified, so it's kind of a swing. He's making a big swing here. All right, this has been a long speculative episode. Thank you for tuning in to it. If you have any thoughts on any of what I just said, so it makes sense to me, hit me up on the Discord. I would really appreciate that. Otherwise, let's continue tomorrow with the penultimate episode of Chapter 16. I'll see you all then. Okay, goodbye. 186. The Countdown of Monte Cristo is part of the Gruntwork Podcast Network. This show is produced, edited, and hosted by Landon Solano. The original text of The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexander Dumas. Theme song by Magic Solo. If you want to support the show and others like it, visit patreon.com/gruntworkpod. Thank you for listening. See you tomorrow.